Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing this morning? Let's talk about the Nolan Wells thing for a second. I was on a live last night, and this is the honest to God's truth, and I'm going to even post in the hashtags where you can go find and listen to it. So here's what happened. They killed Nolan Wells on the boat. They covered him up with the life jackets. They all knew he was on the boat. They just laid him on the back of the boat and got towed in part of the way. Then they got their boat running and they got on in. And when they got in, they couldn't figure out where they were going to put him or what they were going to do. So they dropped everybody off. Then they went back out to the island that the GPS doesn't show, but they did because they disconnected it. Okay? And none of them had their phones with them when they went back. So there wasn't any trace of them going back. And they dumped the body. They came back, took the boat out of the water, then went over there at 3 a.m. and washed the boat, thinking washing the boat would get all the DNA and everything off the boat. That's what they did. Now I'm telling you, the stories are unbelievable at this point. You can't make this up. You know, first, it was about leaving the island. Well, that one blew up. Found out 2 people were at the island, saw him. Then, the Coast Guard, Coast Guard call, CETO call. Nolan, oh my God, Nolan, get up. They heard that. Can't make it up. Not making it up. Then there was the phone, Warren's phone. Now, this. And also, last night, we have a bunch of body experts of their body movements in their interviews that they were not telling the truth. That they're body experts, they moved their eyes like that, or moved like that, or, they looked up, or, something. But I'm telling you, the authorities should use these TikTok creators to solve this case. They are some of the smartest people you will ever encounter. They were talking about the justice system being unfair. I asked them what the 3 legislative bodies of justice were in the United States. They said, well, it's the state, the local, and the sheriff. Okay? It's amazing when you ask a simple question, you can't even get an answer. They don't know the port side from the starboard side on a boat, but yet they know all about boating. It's absolutely amazing, people. And if you will sit back and listen to some of these other lives, I'm going to post the live on my link if you want to listen to a rational discussion of the best live on TikTok. I'm going to post it. Go over there and listen to it. I'm afraid if I say it, I may say it wrong. But that's my body language right there. So anyway, y'all have a good day.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What do we have here, y'all? What do we owe? That's Nolan right there, y'all. That's Nolan right there. I'm trying to do it slow for y'all. This one of them breeze by. You know how they do the little boomerang thing on Instagram and all. This one of those. Y'all, I woke up to a lot this morning. We got a lot of lies being disproved. And we got more video footage, y'all. And I want y'all to let me know. Do y'all think this is real? Or do y'all think this is AI? I don't think it's AI at all. Because when y'all see this, y'all ain't gonna see no 6 fingers and 2 arms and all of that. Everything looks in line. Before we get into it, y'all make sure y'all hit that hype button. Make sure you like the video. And make sure for those that's in the back, stuck in their ways, you never hit no buttons, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Check this out, y'all.
Yes, sister, friend, I will share a longer version. I'm going to add it to this one. But the purpose of this video, I couldn't even sleep last night because I was trying to put A, B, C together. So this picture, the video, excuse me, on June the 23rd helps in a lot of ways because Warren stated in all of the videos in his interviews that they were a tight-knit group of people. And he also said that there were around 20 to 30 people scattered in those 3 or 4 different boats that they had taken, correct? Okay, so
we seeing this one?
The trip on June the 23rd, per Warren, are a tight-knit group of people, would be the same people that we saw inside this picture.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What do we have here, y'all? What do we owe? That's Nolan right there, y'all. That's Nolan right there. I'm trying to do it slow for y'all. This one of them breeze by. You know how they do the little boomerang thing on Instagram and all. This one of those. Y'all see that? So I want y'all to pay attention to see everybody. I'm gonna see who that is in the front. Y'all see this? That's Nolan. That is Nolan. I'm trying to see who it. So you got all these damn people ain't saying nothing. This is wild. 1, 2, 3. There's somebody right here in the cut. There's somebody right here. Somebody right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's somebody at the front of a driver. 5, 6, 7. Justice for Nolan, man. Let's get it, y'all. Look, 2 right there. Hold on.
So
2
that
up
is
there.
where I'm.
2 up there.
So that is.
Look, 2 up there. Just enjoying the breeze and shit. That's sad, man. Sad, man.
So that is where I'm going with the video because Warren, again, said that they were a tight-knit group of friends. Like there's no outsiders in their circle. And so the same people that are on that video on June the 23rd are the same people that are in that still image on Horns Island, allegedly Horns Island, that we see here.
So for those that don't get what she was saying, because I was running my mouth, what she was insinuating is that being as though that they've been implying so much that they're a tight-knit group, tight-knit group, tight-knit group. She showed a video of the tight-knit group with each other. Why the hell the tight-knit group ain't coming out saying nothing? You're tight-knit. Why would Nolan Wells want to go off and venture by himself? And then you had one of the young men say, Nolan always was trying to be with us. Nolan always trying to be on the boat.
If 3 black people took a white man on a boat expedition and didn't return with him, the president would be making a speech right now. There is a double standard of justice and coverage that here's why Kevin discusses in a great post about the national news's silence on Nolan Wells. If you Google Nolan Wells New York Times, there is no article. Nolan Wells MSNBC, nope, they haven't written one. By CNN, all that they have is a TikTok-style video, no written article. And the Washington Post finally has an article only after his body was found. Here's why Kevin references a study that found while black people make up roughly 35% of missing persons cases in the FBI database at the time of the study, they received only 7 to 11% of media coverage. This is why local news outlets like the Mississippi Free Press that's been reporting on this are so important, and why it's so dangerous that news has been consolidating into these big billionaire-owned corporations, forcing lots of local outlets recently to keep shutting down. You can find the GoFundMe of Nolan's family at the Schmink and My Schmio. And one of the most important things is that families will tell you what they need. Sometimes that's privacy, spreading the word, financial support. We don't want to assume, we want to let them tell us how to help. His mother's request a couple days ago was if you have any pictures or videos that were taken on the northwest tip of Horn Island on July 4th to reach out to her. This is her Threads account, and you can provide evidence to help their investigation.
This is why we must be our own news. We cannot look for these people to save us, y'all. We cannot look to these people to push out our message and try to get justice for us. They are all connected, y'all. This is why I be telling us, look, we got to do this together, y'all.
How does young men who we don't really have any evidence that committed a crime, how do they get painted as criminals? How do they get painted as being responsible for the death of a person that was considered their friend?
By putting you on the case. For real, that's like someone accused of SA and then turning Republican. It's pretty much an admission of guilt. For real, why are you even on the case? You're not a cop anymore, Anthony Anderson, who would never be in Blackish. You asked, how do they get painted as criminals? How do you paint them innocent? All you are doing is defending those kids. You're interviewing them. You're pretty much their spokesperson. And just like with Sonia Massey, George Floyd, and everyone else, you're lying about this case. You said those kids took polygraph tests. Now you were checked and proven wrong by Nancy Grace. But here's her interviewing the kid's lawyer.
Have your clients taken polygraphs?
Nancy, my clients have not taken a polygraph test.
Now this guy here is a boy's lawyer. His name is Tyler Cox. Of course it's Tyler Cox. Now what does this lawyer want you to see? Advertisement for his business, Call Cox, and a bottle. The only 2 things he's advertising, his business and another business. Now if you zoom in, you'll clearly see it's a bottle of Verdict bourbon. And he's been doing interviews all over, and he always has that bottle of bourbon behind him. Now, here's Brandon Tatum's podcast. What do you see? I see Verdict bourbon, right? Verdict bourbon is owned by Brandon Tatum. What a coincidence! So you don't think it's a conflict of interest for someone to market your product, who is also the lawyer of the white boys that you are protecting and painting innocent? Now I'm positive Brandon Tatum's gonna have a weak ass excuse. Yeah, when I met him, I gave him a bottle because Verdict, he's a lawyer, Verdict, you know. But if the lawyer had any brains at all, he would see how this would look. By the way, you're defending those kids, Brandon. I wouldn't be surprised if they were drinking Verdict bourbon on the boat. Please threaten to sue me again, Brandon. Let's take this shit to discovery.
I just received this message in my inbox, and it says, I was present during the events involving Nolan. Nolan was on the island with a girl while he had his phone. He later returned to his friends, and they all sailed back to shore. After that, his phone's location moved back and forth before ending up at Evan's house. As around 1 a.m., Nolan had asked for his phone back after he had been taken. Physical altercation followed. He said they observed Nolan gasping for air and coughing up blood. On July the 5th, search teams did not find Nolan. But based on the timeline and the information available to him, I believe that his body was moved sometime late in the evening of July the 5th or during early hours of July the 6th. They are saying that's exactly why there was nothing found in the initial search for Nolan. They believe that Nolan was unalive between July 5th and or either July the 6th. Those final conclusions are their personal beliefs based on them being a witness and knowing. Unfortunately, they weren't on the island to witness or give direct times of the dumping of his body is unfortunately being covered up. One of the boys' mom, who is a judge, went to her house, and that's where the boat was cleaned because she knows what to use to clear evidence because she is a judge. This is truly... Now, all of this is alleged, y'all. It's just...
I want y'all to pay close attention to this next video because he's going to expound on something that I've been meaning to talk about, and it's this moving on up mindset that we have in the black community. When we get a bunch of money or we elevate in life, we feel as though we gotta move and be amongst different people and just leave our own community. And he goes on to say that that may be the problem, trying to assimilate with the people that don't even like us, y'all. Check this out.
Allow me to drop a thought. Black parents must come to realize that they may be part of the problem when their kids lose sight of their own cultural heritage and race. Some black parents love the idea of their black kid being the only black kid in a white group. They somehow believe that it's progress and indications of great success when they can claim mostly white friends. There is an inherent danger when our kids grow up with this illusion of inclusion. Now take, for instance, the Nolan Wells case. It should be a warning shot to all black parents. Stop patting yourself on the back just because you've escaped your own people. At some point, you will realize that all you might have one day are your own people. We have been taught and programmed to not think well of our own race. Therefore, we associate everything good with being white. Now, without any chastisement of the Wells parents, I truly believe that they will search their own souls and parenting styles in regard to their tragic loss. Isolation is isolation. We could not afford to allow our children to isolate themselves in groups that lack other members of their own race. Example.
So the part I want to expound on is when our people get money or whatever, and we feel like we got to disassociate ourselves from our own people. I don't think Nolan Wells' parents did that. I believe Nolan Wells was happy when he was around his own people, like when we see in the TikTok videos. We don't see any TikTok videos of Nolan Wells dancing, doing TikToks, happy and smiling when he's with those white boys. I don't see it, but I don't believe that Miss Christine Wansley and Elmore left the black community just to be around the white community. I feel as though Nolan was associating himself with people that will not accept him. They would never accept him. And I think it would have been best that he stayed around his people.
We got a governor who comes out immediately during a murder investigation and says, we see no foul play. Some people thought that that was suspicious, but it turns out that the governor is actually friends with one of the persons who is suspected of being involved, parents. What does a personal connection, or when does a personal connection become a legal conflict in your opinion?
Right here, right now, we have all the makings of a cover-up.
Boom. Now that, you know what? Now, we are making progress because I stood there the whole time and I said, this is what it is. But you were reluctant to say that. You were extremely reluctant to say that. And I'm gonna tell you, man, for you to come around and hear that evidence, to see how things are stacking up, for you to actually change your position, most people will not change their position. They'll stand on that hill. They don't give a damn what evidence is presented. They're gonna stand on that hill. For you to hear this new findings and to be able to say, they're in trouble, it says a lot about your character.
Thank you. Listen, I've always tried to call balls and strikes, right? I've always tried to be objective from a legal standpoint. I always say that again and again, right? This is a problem. This is a problem out the gate. You are on the money, okay? The fact of the matter is, too many politicians, too many elected officials are tied way too close to too many potential, if not outright, suspects. That's what you have here. That's as clear as day. Now, what that means, people are going to have different opinions, but the conflict is glaring. This is problematic on a lot of levels for the state, for the county, for these individuals, and the longer they stay voluntarily tied to this investigation, the worse it is for them, because they are held to a greater public scrutiny. They are held to higher burdens that we can really dive into their pasts.
There you have it, y'all. We got an attorney who was once on the other side, but then he was man enough to come out after all this stuff we starting to see on the internet. Cito call, these little young men up there lying on podcasts. He like, nah, something fishy. Let me go and come out and let them know I ain't on that side no more. That's a man, somebody who admits when they were in the wrong. But like he said, there are way too many people that are connected with this, people of power. So if one go down, it's gonna be a lot of people to go down, because you're gonna have some snitches up in there too. How did you figure this out? Who assisted you with this? Oh, it was, we'll reduce your time. We'll let you get out. Oh yeah, it was my mom, and then she called some people, and then those people called some people, and then them people called some people. And next thing you know, that's the bombshell right there, y'all. But y'all get in the comment section. Y'all let me know what y'all think about that snippet of the tight-knit group. Remember, they always come out and say, yeah, we were tight-knit. We don't go nowhere without each other. So we see them on that boat, tight-knit. Ain't nobody saying shit. That is wild. Y'all make sure y'all hype this video. Make sure you continue to press the like button, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Big Kish signing out.
Out on the water off the coast of Mississippi on the afternoon of July 4th, a boat calls for assistance. A dispatcher asks a basic question: is everybody on board? And a voice says, yes, everybody's on. Except an 18-year-old named Nolan Wells was not on that boat. He was still on Horn Island 2 days later. His body would be pulled from the water near the same shoreline. He was last observed alive on the island. And in the weeks since, one detail has refused to settle, no matter how many press conferences, how many GPS logs, how many independent autopsies get thrown at it. Two people who were both standing there for the last real conversation Nolan Wells ever had still cannot agree on which direction he said he was walking. If this case matters to you, if you want the next development the moment it drops instead of finding it 3 days late in your recommended feed, that is what subscribing actually does. It costs you nothing, and it means you're first. Alright, let's get into the details. More importantly, this is the story behind Nolan Xavier Wells. Not the version that gets simplified into a headline. Not the version based on a photo nobody bothered to date or a video nobody bothered to identify before it went viral. The version based on what has actually been stated on a record by name. And what still weeks later still does not line up before Nolan Wells was a case number. He was an 18-year-old who cooked his mother's salmon the night before a holiday. Christine Wansley has told that story more than once in more than one interview, and it still carries emotional weight. The night before July 4th, before the trip to Horn Island, before everything that followed, Nolan stood in his mother's kitchen and made her dinner. Salmon, not a big production, simply a son who enjoyed cooking. In a house he was about to leave for the holiday, doing something simple for the woman who raised him. He hugged her, told her he loved her, and headed out. Nolan was 18, a graduate from Ocean Springs High School, a wide receiver who had just started his career at Southwest Mississippi Community College, pursuing a future in football that his family says he took seriously. The kind of seriousness that shows up in small ways, in the discipline of a training schedule, in a body he was building for a purpose. Friends describe him as warm-hearted, full of energy, the kind of person who never met a stranger, who could walk into a group he did not know, and be part of it inside of 10 minutes. His mother calls him a remarkable person. Someone whose entire instinct was to make people around him feel welcome rather than left out. That instinct is worth sitting with because it is part of what makes a day he disappeared so difficult to understand. This was not a withdrawn kid, not someone who drifted to the edges of a group and got lost in the noise. By every account from the people who knew him, Nolan was the one who pulled other people in. That morning, July 4, 2026, Nolan headed to Horn Island with a group of friends, a barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, about 10 miles from Ocean Springs, accessible by private boat, no buildings, no public services across most of it, no lifeguards, no medical facilities, mostly sand and water, and everyone else who came out that day on a holiday gathering. That meant hundreds of people, music, boats anchored along the shoreline. The kind of gathering that has been tradition along that stretch of coast for years. Nolan was last observed by his group of friends sometime around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Blue swim trunks, no shirt, sunglasses. According to the account his friends have given, he had spent part of the afternoon talking to a young woman he'd met that day. According to that same account, when the group's boat ran into mechanical trouble and needed to return to the mainland early, Nolan chose to stay behind, intending to find another ride back later with someone else. He never made it home. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Nolan's friends say he was last observed near that stretch of shoreline, talking with a young woman later identified publicly as Katie. Taken together, sometime after that, accounts differ on the exact minute the boat Nolan's group had arrived on began taking on water. A Bill's pump had reportedly failed. The group decided to head back to the mainland early. And according to the account given by Warren Hudson's mother, a chancery judge named Ashley Cole, that departure happened around 4:30 p.m. At 4:31 p.m., GPS data confirms the boat left Horn Island. It returned to its original dock, then traveled into Fort Bayou around 5:52, back to the dock by 6:06, out again to a boat launch at 7:19, and from there overland, presumably towed by a vehicle to the boat owner's residence in Biloxi. That is a confirmed GPS movement of the vessel connected to Nolan's friend group on the afternoon and evening of July 4th. Sometime around 11 that night, one of Nolan's friends reached out to the Coast Guard. Nolan's mother, Christine, reached out to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office not long after once it became clear her son hadn't come home and was not answering his phone. A phone that, as it later became clear, was not with him at all. It was still on the boat, left behind with a pile of other phones on the dash. The way teenagers heading into open water on a hot day sometimes leave their devices to keep them dry. Search efforts began the next day. The Coast Guard, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the National Park Service, and eventually the United Cajun Navy, a volunteer search and rescue group with 29 minutes a long history of showing up for exactly this kind of case. For 2 days, they searched the water and the shoreline around Horn Island. On July 6th, a National Park Service ranger found Nolan's body in the water off the island's northwestern tip, close to where he'd last been seen 2 days earlier. Official identification did not come through a visual confirmation from a family member. It came through dental records. That detail alone tells you something about the condition in which was found. Even without anyone spelling it out further than that, Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter's office made its first public statement not long after. There's no information that we have right now that would lead us to believe that a crime has occurred, the sheriff told reporters. Coroner Bruce Lind said there were no obvious signs of physical injury. For a lot of people watching this case unfold, that sentence delivered within days of a body being pulled from the water is a moment everything else about this case started to feel rushed. Sheriff Ledbetter's office has since said its language has changed as the investigation has progressed. In a more recent update, the sheriff confirmed his department has been conducting formal interviews with witnesses and that his office has been in direct communication with outside agencies, including the FBI. Tips from the public, he said, have moved this case forward in a real way this past week. He told reporters, "We got a lot of useful information that has come from the public. This investigation is active. It is ongoing. Compare that to the sentence that first lit the story on fire online. No reason to believe a crime has occurred and the shift is hard to miss. It does not mean the department has reversed itself and it does not mean the FBI has captured over case. Local sheriff's departments involve federal partners for all kinds of reasons that fall well short of full takeover. A search that crosses jurisdictional lines. Forensic resources a small county office simply does not have. Or just another trained set of eyes on a case that has grown far bigger than a rural sheriff's office is built to handle alone, especially when an independent examination running in a different state and a family's attorney who has already brought a former NFL player in to help pay for it. Interviewing everyone separately is the only reliable way to see where a group's story stays consistent and where it quietly breaks down detail by detail without everyone in the room hearing everyone else's answers first. Taken together, it does not produce a headline on its own, but it is exactly the kind of work that eventually can reveal a detail like the one Javen Williams gave the Biloxi Sun-Herald. Here is where the story stops being simple. According to the account Nolan's friends have given to reporters in interviews and reportedly to investigators, Nolan chose to stay behind on Horn Island. He wanted to keep talking to a girl he met that day. He planned to catch a later ride back to the mainland. That is a story that has shaped much of the coverage on this case since the beginning. But there is another account, and it comes from the one person who was actually having that final conversation with Nolan. Her name is Katie. Until attorney Ben Crump raised it publicly and until her own family confirmed it, almost nobody covering this case outside of Nolan's own inner circle had said that name out loud. Katie has not given a direct on-camera interview to any outlet. As far as the public record indicates, what exists instead is an account shared through her sister, Gracie McCormick, who posted online on Facebook to lay out what her sister remembers from that afternoon. According to that post, Nolan's friends had been pressuring him to end his conversation with Katie so he could get on a boat with him. Katie spoke with Nolan, and based on that conversation, she believed he was heading back toward the boat he'd originally arrived on, not staying behind. She made it home safely that day on a completely different boat, picked up by other family members. The post also states that Katie assumed the friends telling Nolan to get on the boat wouldn't have left without him and that her family has already given in their words all the answers they can give to both Nolan's mother and to investigators. Sit with that for a second because this is the part that gets lost in the noise. Two people, both physically present for the last conversation Nolan Wells ever had before he disappeared. And 2 weeks later, they still don't agree on which direction he said he was walking. That's not a legal technicality buried in an affidavit somewhere. That's the kind of detail 5 people standing around a barbecue usually remember the same way without even trying. And here it still hasn't lined up. What we have is a second-hand version, Katie's version, filtered through her sister, posted on social media, not a sworn statement, not a direct on-record interview that matters. A Facebook post from a family member is filtered through grief, through the instinct to protect someone who has already been dragged into a national story she never asked to be part of. It is a real account from aerial source, and it should be considered seriously, but it is not the same thing as Katie speaking for herself under oath and treating it as though it would be its own kind of misinformation. What adds weight to it, though, is something separate entirely. Javen Williams, described by Nolan's own family and friends as his best friend and was also on Horn Island that day, gave an on-the-record interview to the Biloxi Sun-Herald. He said he last saw Nolan sometime after 4 in the afternoon hanging out with a girl and other friends and that both Nolan and the girl had left their phones behind on the boat Nolan originally arrived on. He also told CNN something that cuts directly against a version the friend group has told publicly. In his words, "I've never known Nolan to stay back while his friends leave. He's always been a guy where if he rode with you, he's going to come back with you. That's always how it's been every single time." That's not a rumor. That's a named source on the record through 2 separate outlets describing a lifelong pattern behavior. His family also says they had a strange, uncomfortable experience trying to get his car keys back. Keys had been left in a driveway belonging to one of his friends. In other words, not handed over, not dropped off of the family directly, left in a driveway. The same way his phone ended up needing to be located using a location app rather than simply returned by the friends who'd had it. Every item that should have come back to this family automatically, his keys, his phone, a clear account as last hours, has instead had to be located or dug up by the family on their own. And then there's a phone itself. Once Christine had it in hand, she says she found something that felt unusual. Nolan updated his Snapchat constantly, the way most 18-year-olds do, several times a day without a second thought. 39 minutes, but there was no activity at all in the 24 hours before he disappeared. Complete silence from an account that was never silent. The location data attached to the account, according to the family, did not match where the phone was later physically found. That mismatch alone does not prove anything was tampered with. Phone location data drifts and lags all the time, especially near open water with spotty cell coverage. But pair an account that suddenly stopped posting the exact day its owner went missing. It is the kind of detail that still deserves an explanation instead of shrug. It is also worth pausing on how this discrepancy actually reached the public because the path matters. Ben Crump raised a contradiction himself at a press conference alongside Reverend Al Sharpton standing next to Nolan's parents. The obvious contradictions just jump out at you. He said, "Yeah, where a young woman he was talking to says that Nolan said he was going back to get on the boat with the boys. The boys say that Nolan told them he was going to stay and talk to the young woman. That is a direct contradiction. They're not saying the same thing. One of them is telling the truth. One of them is not." Reverend Sharpton, for his part, said plainly that what the family have been told simply does not make sense, and that the lack of confidence in how local authorities initially handled the case only deepened when they learned this young man had reportedly been in some kind of argument that was caught on tape. A detail that, as we've already covered, turned out to be a case off miscaptured identity once traced, and Shepard came forward. Crump also pointed to Nolan's phone as part of the same puzzle. What teenager, he asked, leaves their phone behind if they're planning to stay on island? It is a reasonable question and also in question that does not tell the whole story since multiple friends have separately told reporters that leaving phones on the boat's dash was standard practice for the entire group that day to keep them away from saltwater. It can be normal for a group of friends to leave their phones on a boat. And it can still be the specific detail that makes a grieving family's stomach turn when they're the ones trying to reconstruct their son's last hours from the outside. None of these details captured individually proves that anything happened to Nolan beyond a tragic accident. Clothing gets misremembered. Keys get left behind after a long day in the sun and a few too many drinks. Phones get handed off in a panic and forgotten. But all of it together, the shorts, the keys, the phone, the Snapchat silence, and at the center of it, two people who were both there for Nolan's final conversation, telling two different stories about which direction walked, is a lot of small, specific things a family has had to dig up on their own, one piece at a time, instead of being handed a clear account by the people who are actually standing there. If this is the first time you're hearing Katie's name in connection with this case, you're not behind. Most channels covering this story still haven't said it. That's exactly the gap we exist to close. She had never spoken to and never met. In other words, the claim in that post was striking. That Nolan had actually returned from Horn Island alive, attended a pool party in Jackson County, gotten into an altercation, was beaten, and that his body was captured back to the water afterward. A photo spread alongside it, uploaded to Instagram by an account with fewer than 1,000 followers, deleted shortly after, appearing to show Nolan in a pool surrounded by a group of people. Within hours, it had reached hundreds of thousands of viewers. Attorney Ben Crump reposted the image to his own account. For a huge portion of the internet, that repost became the moment the theory turned into established fact. But Crump's caption, which most people scroll straight past, said something very different for what people took away from it. He wrote that he did not know whether the claims were fact or rumor, and that his team was following all clues until the truth was found. Nolan's mother addressed it publicly as well. She had never spoken to the person behind the original post. Never met them. The certainty did not come from the family or their attorney. It came from an audience working entirely off a photo nobody had actually dated. That question, when was a photo actually captured, had an answer, and Rolling Stone found it alongside photo metadata obtained independently. They published their findings on July 13th. The photo was captured on June 27th, 8 days before the 4th of July, not after Horn Island, 8 days before Nolan ever boarded that boat. The party had captured place in Past Christian, Mississippi. And the person who confirmed the date and identified everyone in the photo, including Nolan, was Trayston Shepard, a close friend of Nolan's, part of the same friend group, who hadn't even attended that particular party, but knew who was in it. According to Shepard, the image was not posted as evidence of anything. It went up on July 5th as part of casual photo dump, a batch of recent memories shared online, the kind almost anyone posts without thinking twice. Uploaded on July 5th and captured on July 5th are two very different things. And that distinction is the entire foundation of viral theory was built on top of Shepard's response to the theory that grew out of that photo was blunt. He called it unbelievable. He called it heartbreaking. The second piece of widely shared evidence was a video shot from a boat near Horn Island capturing a heated exchange between voices, one of them allegedly demanding a phone back. Trump described it at ABC News as Nolan and somebody yelling at tone another on the boat and said he believed the voice belonged to Nolan on Good Morning America. He related directly to the country. You can hear an argument going where Nolan is saying, "Give me my freaking phone. What are you freaking doing?" The person actually in that video eventually spoke for himself. It was traced in Shepard again, the same friend who'd identified the pool photo's real date. He told ABC News plainly, "That's the video I'm referring to, and that is me yelling." He was not in a dispute with no one at all. He'd been in a separate altercation with a stranger and two friends were physically restraining him at the time. Two pieces of evidence, both introduced after Nolan's death, both eventually walked back. One by the reporting that dated the photo, one by the very person whose voice was actually on the recording. Ben Crump himself acknowledged the shift publicly, saying his team had been told one thing by one witness and reported out. Then another witness came forward saying otherwise, and that going forward his team will be more careful to frame things as what a specific witness said rather than as confirmed fact. Why does any of this matter if both of these leads turn out to be unproductive leads? Because it tells you something the rest of this case desperately needs you to understand. Confirmed, disputed, and unknown are not interchangeable categories. The pool photo is shown to be false, dated to a different day entirely. Disputed, not settled, not resolved by either side walking anything back. Still open. Set the photo and the video aside entirely. Put them down. For now, what's left underneath both of those now collapsed threads is the same open gap that started this whole story. Nolan Wells was last observed on Horn Island around 3 in the afternoon. His body was pulled from the water 2 days later, identified through dental records rather than a visual confirmation. Hours passed between his body being found and the public being told it was him. And his own mother was not the one who made that identification. And I want to be straight with you. This channel grows almost entirely because people like you decide a case deserves more attention than it is getting from the bigger outlets. If you made it this far, you're clearly one of those people. There's a piece of dispatched audio at the center of this case that is worth slowing all the way down for because it is one of the only pieces of strong evidence in this entire story that does not rely on anyone's memory. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? A voice calling for a tow. And is everybody on board in good health otherwise? A dispatcher's question, the kind asked as routine procedure anytime a call like this comes in. And the answer, yeah, everybody's on. According to reporting from NBC News and the New York Post, that boat likely had around 7 people aboard and was having trouble at roughly 4 o'clock that afternoon out near the west tip of Horn Island. A Bill's pump failure, a boat operator asking to get unstuck and tow back. The GPS data from a Mississippi Department of Marine Resources shows that boat left the island at 4:31 p.m. Here's the honest, unresolved question sitting underneath that call. We don't know for certain whether Nolan was physically on that boat at the exact moment those words were said, or whether he had already been left on the island by then. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office has confirmed Nolan did not return on that boat. So somewhere in the window between that call and 4:31 when GPS shows the boat actually departing, Nolan was no longer with the group. What happened in that specific window, not the whole afternoon, just that narrow slice of it is one of the central unanswered questions off this entire case. And then there's the phone. Nolan's phone never left the island the way he did. It left on the boat without him. His family used a Life 360 tracking app to locate it after he was reported missing and found at the home of one of his friends. When Christine and her sister went through it, focusing on Snapchat, they found 2 accounts wiped clean. No saved pictures, no snaps from July 4th, even though the family checked before the platform's standard 24-hour expiration window had passed. Christine has said that is deeply out of character. Anyone who knew no one would tell you he was constantly taking pictures and video at gatherings. The kind of person who'd walk up to his own mother before bed just to get one more photo for weeks. The phone sat with the family's independent legal team rather than with law enforcement. And that fact alone generated a wave of suspicion online. But the actual sequence of events is more complicated than a simple refusal to cooperate. On July 15th, following a meeting between the family and Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath, both sides publicly agreed to a mutual inspection of the phone, meeting the family forensic experts and the state's investigators who examined the device together at the same time, seeing the same data pulled the same way. Attorney Eric Hers, leading the family's independent investigation alongside former law enforcement experts, confirmed that arrangement directly as of the most recent public reporting. Both sides have agreed to that shared forensic inspection, though the exact scheduling and completion of it has continued to be a moving target throughout this case coverage. Why does a shared forensic inspection detail matter so much? Because of evidence chain. As simultaneous mutual extraction, both sides watching the same screen at the same moment, is one of the only ways to make sure the final findings from that phone can actually hold up whichever direction they point. For now, multiple established outlets have reported on just how much false information filled the silence while this case's official record moves slowly. When a case involved as much public scrutiny and this little confirmed detail coming from official channels, the gap between what people want to know and what's actually been verified becomes the exact space where fabricated claims spread fastest. And this case has had more than its share of that. If you see a claim online right now insisting the autopsy results are already out, especially one describing some striking new finding, treat it with real skepticism until it is confirmed by a named source you can actually check. And every rumor that eventually turns out false does not just waste attention in the moment. It makes the real findings whenever they land harder for people to trust. It has gotten uglier than just false photos and misidentified voices. Second, Ben Crump has confirmed that people connected to this case, including friends who cooperated with investigators like Traces Tin Shepard, have received actual threats of violence since Nolan's body was found. Shepard himself has said as much directly. He and others in a friend group have been targeted since coming forward, which is part of why he chose not to appear on camera, even while giving detailed on-record statements to reporters and to the sheriff's department. Crump has also confirmed that AI-generated videos falsely depicting Christine Wansley have spread online. Fabricated footage of a grieving mother built and spread for engagement while she is simultaneously trying to plan her son's funeral. Whatever position anyone holds on the underlying facts of this case, that specific cruelty deserves to be named for what it is. Crump's message on it has been consistent. Nobody's life should be threatened in the pursuit of the truth. And nobody should be presumed guilty before actual evidence exists. A standard that has to apply to every name connected to the story on every side of it. Or it does not mean anything at all. More than the photo, more than the video, more than anything else we've covered so far. I read these and it genuinely shapes which thread we dig into next. Let's talk about where this case actually stands legally, because there's a lot of noise online about what different developments mean, and most often overstates what's actually been confirmed. Following their meeting with the district attorney, Ben Crump confirmed that Jackson County will present this case to a grand jury once the sheriff's office concludes its investigation. A grand jury referral is not the same thing as criminal charges. It means a citizen panel will eventually review the evidence gathered and decide whether there's enough to support an indictment. According to reporting from Law and Crime, a grand jury referral for an unnatural or suspicious death is actually routine procedure in Jackson County. The district attorney's office has stated publicly that authorities have not indicated this is currently being treated as a criminal investigation. That does not mean nothing will come of it. It means the process itself at this stage is not confirmation of a specific outcome in either direction. Civil rights attorney Tyler Bailey, speaking of Law and Crime, laid out what a grand jury could actually be looking at if this does move forward. And it is a wider net than most people assume. It does not have to mean a homicide charge. It could involve tampering with evidence, obstruction, accessory after the fact. Anything connected to how the aftermath of Nolan's disappearance was handled, independent of how he actually died. That distinction matters because it means even if the ultimate cause of death is never conclusively proven to be anything other than an accident, there could still be legal consequences tied to what happened after. 2 separate autopsies conducted by 2 separate teams with 2 separate sets of findings still pending. If those 2 reports come back describing fundamentally different pictures of what happened to Nolan Wells, that divergence alone becomes one of the most significant developments this case has produced. If they align, it closes off one of the most persistent sources of public suspicion. Either way, until both are actually released, everything built on top of that uncertainty. More importantly, every theory, every online argument, every confident claim about what really happened is standing on an incomplete foundation. There's another thread here that is easy to miss underneath the bigger headlines. And it goes directly to how strained the relationship between this family and local law enforcement has actually been. Under Mississippi law, a crime victim's family is entitled to receive an incident report within 72 hours. That window came and went. By the time Christine and Elmore sat down with the district attorney, they still did not have it. Christine has said publicly that the last time anyone from the sheriff's department had directly contacted her before that meeting was a previous Tuesday. And even that contact was a single text message, one she sent herself, simply asking for an update on her own son's death investigation, more than a week into an active investigation. That was the entire extent of direct communication from the lead agency handling her son's case. Part of what came out of the meeting with the DA's office was an acknowledgement of that gap. The district attorney's office has since said it would take over as a primary 1-hour point of contact going forward with an assigned victim advocate assigned specifically to the family. That's aerial concrete change. It is also worth sitting with the fact that it took a public press conference, a national attorney, and weeks of silence before that basic level of communication was put in place at all. Civil rights attorney Tyler Bailey speaking with Law and Crime's Jesse Weber put some of this in sharper context. Asked how significant it was that the DA met directly with the family and their legal team. Bailey did not hedge. That's not common. He said, not in situations like this one. He pointed to the sequence itself as a real story. A sheriff's office had initially said there was no reason to suspect foul play followed by a family demanding an independent investigation followed by a joint meeting and a joint agreement to inspect evidence together. That sequence, Bailey said, reflects genuine pressure from public scrutiny changing how this office is choosing to operate. Not proof of wrongdoing on anyone's part, but clear signal that the version of this case the public was first given was not the final word. A body recovered from open water, no visible signs of trauma reported at the scene can still take this long to produce even a preliminary cause of death. Because that delay is one of the most misunderstood parts of this entire story. When a body has been in the water for an extended period, a straightforward outside examination often cannot rule things in or out the way people assume it can. Water itself can obscure or wash away exactly the kind of evidence. Bruising, ligature marks, defensive wounds that would otherwise point clearly toward one explanation or another. That's part of why toxicology matters so much here. A full toxicology testing does not just look for illegal substances. It can help establish whether alcohol or other compounds were present at levels that would affect someone's ability to swim, to stay conscious, or to call for help, which matters enormously in distinguishing an accidental drowning from something that involved another person's actions. It can also help establish a more precise window for time of death, which in turn helps investigators figure out whether Nolan was still alive during that unexplained gap between roughly 3 o'clock and the boat's confirmed 4:31 departure, or whether whatever happened to him had already occurred by then. None of that work can be rushed without risking a result that later collapses under scrutiny, which is part of why both the state's toxicology results and the family's independent examination have captured weeks rather than days even under this much public pressure. Defense attorneys aren't present. Ben Crump representing the family will not be in a room either. It will be a prosecutor presenting the case to a citizen panel. And prosecutors retain what's called prosecutorial discretion, meaning even a joint agreement to eventually present evidence to a grand jury does not legally require the DA's office to pursue charges afterward or even convene the grand jury on a fixed timeline. Bailey's read on that dynamic was direct. If this office ultimately declines to pursue charges, there will be lasting questions about whether the grand jury was given a complete picture of the evidence or an arrow one shaped to reach a particular outcome. More importantly, that's not an accusation that it will happen here. It is a description of exactly why so many people are watching the specific process as closely as they are and why the family's insistence on transparency. The joint phone inspection, the repeated public meetings, the refusal to simply wait quietly matters as much procedurally as it does emotionally. While all of this is played out, the press conferences, the disputed video, the disputed photo, the phone that still needs a shared forensic inspection, Nolan's family has also had to do something no family should have to manage in parallel with demanding an investigation. Plan a funeral for an 18-year-old in public with the entire country watching. Services were held at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs with visitation the morning followed immediately by the service. Reverend Al Sharpton officiated at the family's request. Filmmaker Tyler Perry covered the full cost of the funeral. Colin Kaepernick helped fund the independent examination. A life celebration followed at the Jackson County Fairgrounds. Anne Christine has been clear about why she wanted it framed that way rather than as a traditional somber past. Nolan, she said, would not want everyone sitting around crying in silence. He'd want a party. So that is what she gave him. Open to former teammates, coaches, classmates from every level he ever played at, and notably open to media as well. That last detail is worth sitting with for a moment. A mother who still did not have her son's official cause of death chose to let cameras into his funeral anyway because she has said on multiple occasions that the moment the world stops watching is the moment this case risks losing whatever momentum has forced answers out of local officials. So far, that instinct to keep the story public rather than let retreat into private grief has defined this family's approach from day one. It is also honestly part why this case has generated as much noise as it has. Attorney Eric Hers has said the family's family tip line has been receiving somewhere between 50 and 100 calls a day from people who were on Horn Island that day or who know people who were. Some of those callers, according to Hers, aren't talking to local law enforcement at all. They're calling the family's team specifically. His stated goal is not to keep that information contained within the family's own investigation, but to get those witnesses connected with official investigators directly so that whatever they know does not simply evaporate because someone was too hesitant to walk into a sheriff's office. Whether that volume of tips ultimately produces anything that changes the picture of what happened in Nolan is still an unanswered question, but it tells you something about how far this case has traveled beyond a single county's jurisdiction and how many people, total strangers taught his family, have decided this is a story worth calling about it. We're deep into this one now. And I appreciate everyone still with us. That tells us something about how much this case actually matters to the people watching it, even when larger networks have already moved on to the next headline. Both sides have agreed to a joint forensic inspection of Nolan's phone. Here is what's disputed. Whether Nolan told Katie he was heading back to the boat Asher family's account states, or whether he told his friends he was choosing to stay behind as their account states. Whether the clothing described in the police report, black shorts, matches the blue swim trunks' family, says photos from that day actually show him wearing. Whether the missing Snapchat content and location data mismatch on his phone indicate anything beyond ordinary technical inconsistency. And here is what remains simply unknown. More importantly, the official cause and manner of Nolan Wells' death still pending both the state autopsy's toxicology results and the family's independent examination. What specifically happened in the roughly 90 minutes between Nolan being last observed and his friends both completing its documented movements that evening. Whether any criminal charges will ultimately result from a grand jury process that hasn't yet begun. Whether Katie will ever give a direct on-record account in her own words rather than one relayed to her family. It isn't a claim that Katie did anything wrong. Two people can each give an honest, good faith account of a chaotic, crowded, alcohol-involved afternoon on a barrier island and still end up remembering it differently. What this list is instead is a record of exactly where the confirmed facts stop and the disputes begin. drawn as precisely as the public record allows so that nobody watching this video walks away thinking they know more than what's actually been established. That's the honest shape of this case as it stands right now. Not a verdict, not an accusation aimed at any single named individual. A list of facts, a list of open disputes between real people who were actually there, and a list of questions nobody, not the sheriff's office, not the district attorney, not the family's independent investigators, has been able to close yet. Underneath every timestamp, every GPS log, every dispute account who said what to whom on a crowded beach, there's still a mother who cooked salmon with her son the night before he left, and who has not stopped fighting for an answer since. Christine Wansley has said in more than one interview that grief does not move in a straight line. That some moments she can talk about her son's stories and laugh, and the next moment she can barely breathe. She's also said on multiple occasions that if Nolan were here, he'd tell the same thing he always did. Keep talking to people. Keep telling my story. That's what she's chosen to do. Press conference after press conference. Subpoena after subpoena. Even while planning the Kindoff service, no parent should ever have to plan. There's a version of this story where all of it, the GPS logs, the towing audio, the joint phone inspection, the grand jury referral, the debunked photo, the misidentified voice, Katie's dispute account, Javon Williams' on record statement eventually resolves into something clean, a single agreed upon explanation that a jury or a family or the public can actually rest on. It is also possible this case ends the way too many cases like it do, with an official finding that satisfies the legal standard for closing a file without ever fully satisfying the people who love Nolan most. Either outcome is still ahead of us, not behind us. That's the discomfort at the center of covering a case like this one. Honestly, you don't get to manufacture the ending. You only get to lay out as clearly and as fairly as a record allows exactly how far the truth has traveled so far and exactly how far it still has to go. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. A wide receiver with a real future in front of him. A young man his own mother describes as someone who never met a stranger, who made the people around him feel seen. He was supposed to come home that 4th of July. The unanswered questions remain, but so does the distinction between evidence and speculation. At this stage, the record establishes Nolan Wells' trip to Horn Island, his disappearance, the recovery of his body, the documented boat movements, the unresolved accounts surrounding his final hours, and the continuing legal review. Nothing in that record allows a responsible narrator to declare a crime as fact before investigators reach that conclusion. For Nolan's family, the search for an answer continues, and the evidence must lead the way now.